And really this is about a lot of things, we sort of odds and ends of some studies we've done. And what I'm going to do is I want you to bear with me because we have a couple, you understand why we're doing what we're doing in 5 minutes. So don't walk out for the first 5 minutes because you'll get where we're going, even though it may sound not like we are. And here I'll just talk so you don't see it. So these are jumping spiders, of course, and these spiders are amazing organisms that are closely related to mites, so that's the connection. And we'll make that too. And these things do pretty incredible feats. Like these, you just saw them dance, those peacock jumping spiders dance. And this largest jumping spider is able to jump incredible distances. Like, I mean, watch some of these distances that this thing jumps. And so it has that, it of course has that cocoon that it spins and that has a base, but look at that, the incredible force at which she is jumping. And the thing to realize about that is they're not using muscles, which is odd. And so even though there's some muscles to help control how or where she's going, most of that force that she is using is actually her hemolymph, her blood. And so what happens is she has really high blood pressure. Incredibly high blood pressure, which she can actually direct to go into her legs very, very quickly, and that forces those legs to extend, and that gives her the momentum to jump forward. And so this is about blood pressure. One of the reasons they discovered this was there was a guy who wanted to study how spiders think and wanted to drill a hole in the spider's head and get an electrode there into the brain to read it. And every time he would poke the head, he would get a shot of blood in his eye because there was so much pressure that it would shoot right out of the spider. And so the reason we're talking about this here, just because they're incredible, I started teaching introductory entomology, and so I just have all these other great stories to tell, not just about bees now. And so this is an incredible feat that's done in a very different way than, say, mammals do. And so that's pretty impressive. This is the best final shot like that. Ah! So, it would be like us jumping over a school bus, which is pretty incredible if you think that's all driven by blood pressure. So, we go back to this analogy of mites, this blood-sucking mite. And the question is, and I think that the story I'm going to tell you today in this session is give you an appreciation for the mite. We have to admire this mite. And also to touch on some work, which means that I think we don't nearly know half of what we thought about mites. And I want to make that case too. That in and of themselves, these things are to be respected. And so let's just think about what we think about in mites. So mites are part of there's ticks, and we think of ticks too. They're pretty closely related to mites. And if we look at their mouth, the mouth parts, this is just bad. I don't think there's a laser. That's okay. So if we look at their mouth parts, you're just gonna have to.
No, I guess that's my slideshow.
No, it's working fine. So if we look at these mouth parts, what we can see is a couple of different sections. We see these. There's this red, see the big red, and so you can imagine that's really good for drilling down into the flesh. We have these pedipalps on the side, sort of keeping things apart. So we have all these intricate parts, and clearly it can pierce in terms of ticks through people's skin. So you can just press the green. If we look at that, this is the tick feeding process, right? So you've probably seen this before, like with Lyme disease and everything. We have this tick, and it sort of bites right through the flesh. It chews there with these barbs. It's going to spit. It's going to suck up some fluid, and it's going to spit it back out. And in that spit is sometimes diseases, human diseases or liver diseases, and sometimes, but it's really spitting in there because it wants to prevent that blood from clotting, because there's nothing like getting a blood clot in your throat, right? So it wants to avoid that, and so it's spitting anticoagulant agents in that blood so it can suck up this blood. And then look at what it does. It's sucking up that blood, and its abdomen just expands, or that back part of it just expands full of blood. Next slide. And so if we look at that, what we can see is that if this is a blood feeding mite, and what you can see is it grows incredibly big in order to accommodate the blood that it's been eating. Now, what do mites eat? Hemolymph, right, which is bee blood. But mites don't seem to do this, do they? So that's sort of odd. If we look at this is a fly. Another thing, this is a black fly, of course. It probably just hurts just looking at this thing. I want you to look at its butt. I want you to look right at the tick really carefully, because you can see as it's sucking up blood, what it's doing is that there's a lot of water in blood, and it doesn't want water. It doesn't need the water. There's no nutrients in water, so it actually, in its digestive system, has these filters which try to force out as much water as possible so it can poop. Watch it. Watch it. It's going to happen. Watch. Oh. Here it is. Don't close your eyes. There we go. Boom. Did you see it? So that was really clear water. So what's happening is it's sucking up all this blood, and that water doesn't have any use, so it wants as much nutrients as possible, so it's filtering out as much water as possible, so as much of the good stuff is left for it to take home. Well, mites don't do this either. We'll go to the next slide. And then we look at the digestive system of the mites, and we look at the digestive system of the mites. Oh, here we go. And so if we look, there's this thing. So here we see the stomach actually sort of surrounds the ovaries. These are actually the ovaries, and that stomach sort of goes to the sides and gets tucked in here. And so the digestive system doesn't look like something that eats blood. So everything's wrong. So it doesn't grow like a normal varroa mite. It doesn't grow like a normal blood feeder. It doesn't expand like that. It doesn't have the stomach of a normal blood feeder. And so maybe we need to consider whether they're blood feeders or not. And so that's going to be the end of my talk. But before that, I want to talk about some of these pictures. And to do that, here we see a mite, right? And we know that mites are able to get underneath the sclerites of the bees. And you can imagine that has to be some sort of feat. Like, how do they do that? I mean, they slide in. Well, that might explain why they're so thin. So it can sneak in there. And so I want to talk... Wow. Tom, you've given me your thumbs. So I want to talk about this work. This is the work of Sammy Ramsey. He's a PhD student in my lab. He's really done this work with Ron Ochoa. And so I'm not a morphologist. A lot of these structures are pretty amazing to me, and it's really a lot of his work here. But he went through and he just wanted to see, okay, where do we find mites on a bee? So we go through and he did 100 mite-infected bees, and he found that most of the mites are found at the bottom on the left-hand side of the bee. There was a clear difference between the right and left-hand side, which is sort of, I don't get that at all, but there was a clear bias to the side. Some mites on top, but most of them underneath. This brings home a very important question. There are a lot of people who say, I don't have mites. And you say, why? I said, I look and I can't see. Well, do you flip them over and look underneath their sclerites? Because that's where most of them are. So by the time you see a lot of mites on your bees, what you're doing is you're counting your dead colonies, because by the time you see all those mites, those colonies are probably all gone. And that's why you have to do a sugar roll. So what he's able to do is to go to the electron microscope facility down at the USDA down the road from us. You have to get these mites, and then you freeze them, and then you spray them with gold, and then this microscope, because light waves are too big in order to get focused, so they use other electron beams that bounce off the gold, and that's how you get these pictures. So this picture was one that he complained so much about this picture, because what you have to do is you get a bee with a mite on it, and then you get a razor blade, and you hit it really hard, and you hope that it breaks at the right place. And it took him 80 of these things and a lot of complaining about, oh, my fingers, and suddenly he has this great picture, which really gives you a good idea that, first of all, this is upside down, right? You're thinking, well, it's upside down. Well, this is where the mites are. They're at the bottom. And what you see is that it's wedged right in there, and right over here is where its head is. And so it must be feeding on this stuff over here. So this is where it is. So this is the mite. You can see its tissue there. This coloration is done by a technician. This is all black and white pictures, really. So the colors are meant to help highlight. So, okay, so now we see where those mites are. Well, let's look at the mites a little bit more closely. So here's a mite. You can see the bee here. We can see these sclerites here. Now look at these hairs. So these hairs, and then there are these hairs over here, which are very different too. Look at it, folks. But some people speculate that these hairs on top of the carcass of the mite here, that those hairs are meant to imitate the hairs of the bee. And that's a study we'd like to do to see, well, is that hair sort of a way of camouflage? Is that how the mites don't get detected by the bees as they're walking around? A good question. I don't know that we have the answer, but certainly the ecologist that I'll introduce you to in a minute suggests that's the case. So let's watch a mite questing. So when a mite is released, or when it's outside, if you drop a mite on a bottom board, this is what that mite does. And see that characteristic push? Doesn't that remind you of the spider? It's that same blood pressure that it's using to lift its legs. And it's probably using those to help lift up that sclerite so it can squeeze underneath, right? So there's a lot of power in that leg movement. So you can see how that questing behavior. So what it's going to do is it's going to pop those, but it's going to sit there and wait for a bee to come, and it's going to grab on top and sort of feed. And so this is a picture of that side view. This is a really amazing pictures. One of the things you can see here are these hairs here. See how spiky they are, how different they are from the hairs up here? And these hairs, you can watch the mites move them, which I've never noticed before. But if you watch really carefully, they move. And so part of this is one of the speculations that Lana Cho is saying, is that these sort of help fight, like grab onto the bee too, so that there's some traction, so it can't get dislodged easily, is these hairs. There's been some speculation that this is how they ward off mite or bees from gnawing on them too, but these really, you can see them move. So these are actually like appendages moving on the side of the mite. Oh, sorry. These are appendages moving on the side of the mite. And also here you can see that leg and its questing pose, and then its sort of foot pad over here, but it's closed. So here's a close-up of that foot pad. And this is the closed foot pad, so you can see it's sort of folded underneath here, and this is the tip of that foot, and you can see this padding here. And then if we look at this next picture here, you can see that it's able to open up that pad, and that's how it's holding on to whatever it's holding on to. So that's how it's like a suction cup. It's holding on to the bee. That's how it grabs onto the bee. And it's able to fold that and close that. Now, there's been a lot of people who suggested that the reason why, if you put powdered sugar into a bunch of bees and it dislodges the bees, there's been some speculation that that powdered sugar gets clogged up into those pads so they can't hold on anymore. I think that the evidence is pointing towards that actually what's happening is that when you put the powdered sugar in there, the bees get agitated and start to fly and move their muscles, and it raises the temperature. And if you raise the temperature pretty quickly, the mites drop off in response to the heat. And so that's probably not the truth about the powdered sugar on the feet. It's probably some sort of heat response. here's that same mite again. Now we see it underneath the sclerite. And so let's look at this next. This one was a real surprise to us. So let's watch this. You're going to have to watch really carefully though here. So here's the mite, and I want you to see that questing behavior. It's got it there. But I want you to look at its head. So watch the head really, really carefully. I don't know why they filmed this going in circles because it drives me crazy. But see that? Do you see that? How it pumped that head up? Did you see that? See, it's not. The head is not static. The head actually goes back and forth. And we know this for sure. If we get a mite and it's still alive, you can't freeze it and bolt coat it to do this. But if you push on the bottom of the mite right here, its head pops out. So it's obviously there's something about the head moving out that's important for this mite. It has something to do with the feeding or something else. And so here we can see how those mouth parts actually come out. So you can see there's this neck region right here, and then these mouth parts over here. And so that part there, it turns out, expands and contracts and expands and contracts. And so maybe that's part of the force it needs in order to get its mouth parts in to take out some of the feed that it needs. So here you can see this close-up. And so what these are the chelicerae. And so just like spiders and all mites, they have chelicerae. So these chelicerae are there, and we think these have some sensory roles, that they're somehow sensing the environment. But obviously it's more than that. Let's take a look at this big, big spike over here. And so you can, oh wait, sorry, we're going to go back. So what I'm going to show you now is a close-up of this. This part is the expandable part. You can see the hard sclerites here. Well, that you wouldn't expect to be moving because that's all hard. But this is still that flexible membrane is in the back here. And so you can see that again here. So you can see that clearly that's expandable organ. So again, emphasizing the fact that this head or this big mouth parts are able to come in and out. Then let's look at these spikes. If you look really carefully, I think this is better in this next picture, you can see that these look a lot like seam cutters, right? You know what you use to cut seams with? So what the heck is that for? Well, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. But the theory is that maybe when they get into where they need to go, that part of it is trying to get through that membrane, and maybe they're using that to help tear up some of the fibers. Now, that's a really nice thing to say. It's totally an imagined thing. It's the experimental. Like, why would they have it? It's proving very difficult to get in there and watch them do it in life because you have to get under the sclerites. And so there's some really exciting work getting done trying to watch that really carefully. But pretty impressive, eh? And so again, you can see that. The other thing I want to point out, if you look really carefully at this hair here, there's a hole at the tip. See that? You see that hole? Or you just pretend you do. And that hole is how the mites smell. And so one of the things that the mites do, of course, is when they invade a larva, and they invade larvas all the time, what they do is they smell the larva. And they say, are you smelling like you're about to pupate? And if they are smelling like they're about to pupate, they stay. And if they aren't smelling like they're about to pupate, they jump on the next nurse bee and get moved to the next larva. And so how they're smelling is through these holes. Now, when the guys at the USDA looked at this, he says, Dennis, this is so exciting. Do you think you can get us $500,000 to get a scope that can look down the hair? So if any of you have $500,000 to spare, these guys can look down the hair for you. And that would be pretty exciting, I think. But maybe we have to hit up some of your honeybee forge model people. But anyway, so this is the hair. Now, I bring this up because there's one, being the pragmatist, there are complaints about formic acid. And a lot of people complain about the fact that formic acid, once you've applied it, a couple weeks later you come back and your mite levels have gone up. And they say, see, formic acid doesn't work. But this is work that we did when I was still at Penn State. So over 5 years ago, we saw this phenomenon too. But what we did notice is we kept monitoring those colonies that had been treated with formic, and another month later, they had 1/3 the mites that the control did. So for a while, the mite population went really, really high, and then it dropped really, really low. And so what's going on there? Well, we did take some bees, and then we did some electron microscope work on it. You can see my ability to take the pictures is much inferior to theirs. But what you can see is that after formic acid treated, these hairs are all singed. And so what we think is happening is that when you treat with formic acid, some of that formic acid gets under the capping, and it might not kill some of the mites outright, but it does singe those hairs, which means that they have no ability to smell when that brood is good stage to invade. So our theory is that these mites, the reason your mite population went up is because there are no more mites under the capping, or very few, because they're smelling, they're saying, oh, this isn't any good, because they can't smell, and they jump out on the adult. So when you're monitoring after a formic acid application, and you see this huge spike in mites, that doesn't necessarily mean that it hasn't worked. You have to give it some time for these mites to get down. It's going to take a little bit of time for the mites on the adult population to decrease. Does that make sense?
Yes.
How much is that?
Well, in that one study we did, it took 1 month later, it was like, what's going on? And 2 months later, it was good. So between a month and 2 months.
Okay, thanks.
So, again, this picture here really shows you the difference between the pieces that are flexible and thin. So these are the thin membranes, and these are the hard sclerotized parts. But this is the classic view of the mouth part. It's what, we all look at the mouth part. We assume, okay, this is exactly how the mites are with the ticks and everything like that. And so we have this picture here, that's the electron microscope. So you can see there's this tube, and we thought this tube went down, and that's where the liquid came in. And then we have these joined pieces here. Here we see those pedipalps that we saw before, the seam cutters, and these sensory things. So this was our world view of the mouth parts. And as they did this, it so happened that in one sample, so I have to give you a story. So this is Ron Ochoa. And Ron Ochoa is a mite guy, and if you've ever met Ron Ochoa, he is very, very excited about mites. Like, he's a lot of charisma. And so, it's a lot of charisma. Like, you're just compelled and don't know why you haven't dedicated your life to looking at mite and their hairs and stuff. So he's a great Latin, with a lot of expression. So it's a real fun thing, but it's a little, overwhelming. And he knows I'm telling this story, right? So, when he saw this picture, and he sent it to me, I go, yeah, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. But suddenly, he is like, Dennis, we have to have a meeting. This is so exciting. Da, da, da. And Sammy, my student, they're all excited. They have to have a meeting this afternoon. I have to cancel all my meetings to meet with them. They're so excited because apparently this totally rewrites how the varroa mite's mouth parts evolved. Like, this has not happened in any other mite family. So if you're not impressed or having a hard time being impressed, you should invite Ron Ochoa, and I'm sure he will give you the confidence that this is very impressive. But it does mean that something else is very different happening there. So these varroa mites have evolved in a way to become parasites in a different way than the blood-feeding mites. So they're using those same mouth parts, but they've evolved them and changed them in such a way that they're merging parts that aren't the same in the ticks. And so what you can also see here is that the tip, it has sort of this sledgehammer bit. So this is the tip right here. And so this is that that's going through the membrane. And so if you look up there, it's pretty sharp. This blob here is just water that got frozen. So it's not really here. So you can see it's split up. It's got this tip here, and that tip is like this sledgehammer or axe head that can cut through the membrane according to their thoughts. And you can see that up close here. And then it also has these things with these little teeth, like chainsaw. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? So we have this sledgehammer head that pops through apparently, and then we have these other things that come through with these teeth and start presumably, because these things are hinged. You'll see that in a minute. And you can see that they look a lot like the teeth on a chainsaw. So this is just cruel because they just cut the head off. And you're never really sure what you're looking at. But here, this is the front, this is the mouth part here. So here you can see that bit, and here's those chain, see how this could move? You can see how there's a hinge there? You can imagine it moves. There's the teeth, and so it's in there. And then over here, look at this, what's going on over here? This merge part. You got really excited. Ron did. Yeah, I'm exaggerating a bit, right? But you never ruin a good story with some exaggeration. So you have this bit here, and then you look closely, and you can see how these things come up. And then look at these funnels over here, these channels. And so that's where we think the saliva is coming down into the mite. And if the proof is in the pudding, that's the wound on a larva bee. So you can see two distinct, you remember those teeth-like things? So these two distinct marks. It's getting in there, and obviously it's getting some juice that way. You can see the juice spilling out and then freezing on that larval bee. So really, this is sort of the mite. This is a bee, and this is the mite. And there we come, there's the chainsaw, and there we go. And so really, that's what a mite looks like if you're a bee. And so if you've ever thought twice about treating for bees, or you're treating your bees, just think about the poor alien lady and what options you would. I'm just kidding. So I wasn't supposed to show a graph, but I can't help but show some graphs because I'm sort of trembling now and withdrawal. So I'm going to show you the summation of Sammy's work. Well, part of his work. It's a little part, but it's really fascinating because it totally changes how we think about mites. We fed them. He made these little pills that he wrapped up in cellophane, and he filled them up with either nothing, with just bee hemolymph, 75% hemolymph, 25 fat, 50-50, 25-75, and pure fat. And every day he had to change this stuff out. So he had a lot of complaining about how spending all night sucking up fat and sucking up hemolymph to feed his swarms of bees. But look at this. This is the average age of survivorship. It's really hard to get mites to live much beyond 2 days in the lab, which is incredible because, we can't get rid of them in the hive, but we can't rear them in the lab. So there's something going on. But look at this. There seems to be a pretty clear relationship that if you add fat, the mites live longer. Then he actually saw some mites lay eggs, which has never been done in the lab before. This is really bizarre. So here, look at this. Here's an egg. That's a close-up of the egg. See that? See how you can see it's about to hatch? All the leg parts sort of splitting through the eggshell. So here, that's talk about aliens getting born. Doesn't that look like an alien? So here we have this egg. And in fact, he found, he talks about this one bee that had made bad life choices. Because this one bee that was fed, this mite that had been fed only hemolymph, one of those mites had an egg. However, we saw as many as 30% of the bees that got pure fat laid eggs. Oh, sorry, mites. I'm getting tired, sorry. So mites. So this really does strongly suggest that the mites are not eating hemolymph, they're actually fat feeders. And that changes a lot. That changes a lot because we know that fat bodies in bees are where a lot of the hormones are used, where a lot of it's an organ that really helps the bees. We've always heard fat bees are better than skinny bees, right? Like in the winter. Well, that's the tissue that it seems that the mites are eating. And so if that holds true, and science is never definitive on one set of studies, other people have to verify it, and all that. But if this does hold up, and I think it will, it's pretty, you look at the life history of the mites, how did we miss this very basic fact about it? And if you look back in the literature, in the 1980s when they decided that it was blood that they were feeding on, they said, well, because sometimes when a mite feeds on a bee, the bee has deformed wings, which means it didn't have enough pressure to fill up its wings. Well, what do we know about deformed wings now? It's a virus that's transmitted by mites. And so that logic doesn't hold very well. And so it was only on those series of experiments where they said that the whole argument that they were blood feeding came from. And so we have to, if we go back to the very fundamentals and just try to reimagine that, I think that it's going to revolutionize how we think about treating them and how we understand the damage that they cause. So I think this is pretty exciting, interesting stuff. Of course, if you remember that picture I started with that area right in front of the mic, remember that at the front? That was all fat that was right in front of it. There was no, I mean, there's some hemolytic fat, but its mouth part isn't big enough to pass the fat and actually suck up the hemolytic. There's pretty, I think, strong evidence that this is that we shouldn't think of these as vampires, but werewolves. So my original picture is well, I mean, I don't know that I don't think that these are statistically different. I mean, I think there's some chance there. I mean, this is. Okay, I'm going to tell you a couple of other stories about CCD. I'm telling these sort of tongue-in-cheek, but I'm telling them too because I think one of the things that's really true for me is that it's important to follow the data, even when you don't like the data you have. And so this was a case, when CCD first broke, that we were doing a whole bunch of autopsies on bees, and I'll show you some of those in a bit. And then one of the technicians said, you know what, I keep finding these blue wormy things in my bees. That's a thread, don't be silly. And he just was really persistent with it. It was Mike Andre, he's now a commercial beekeeper. And no, there's these blue things, and it's really, really weird, and they look like worms, and what are they? And then we started looking on the internet, and here, there's this disease. And the CDC, the doctor said, oh, there are these people who have this psychosomatic imagination that they're sick. And they get these scabs, and then they take all these pictures and they find all these, like theirs look pretty close to that other thing, right? And the CDC had just decided they were going to do an investigation to make sure that it wasn't just a psychosomatic problem, right? So we're going, what the heck is going on now? Like, how are we going to do this? And then we brought it to the electron microscope, and we took some pictures and that sort of looks like it might be a living thing, eh? Like, that's sort of weird. But the thing is, we didn't find a butthole. And so you sort of expect either to find a mouth or an exit, right? You want an entrance or an exit if it's living. But we didn't really find any, and I don't know. So then we went to the FBI. We said, FBI, we'd like to send you some stuff to see if you know what this is, right? Because the thread thing was still a little bit relevant. So the FBI said, we can't do, the state police said, we can't do